Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. For 10 years after marriage, my husband has insisted that our son pretend to be sickly and forbids him from attending physical education classes. Just because Vanessa's daughter, who has a congenital heart condition, cannot run or jump and fears being ridiculed, he wants our son to be like her so that he won't be isolated. When he once again scolded our son for walking too fast and not acting like a sick person, I finally lost all hope and stayed up all night drafting a divorce agreement. The next day, I approached our son's homeroom teacher and requested a transfer for our child under the pretext of his development. The homeroom teacher was quite pleased. Lucas is a healthy child. I previously thought he learned from Selena. Clearly wanting to play basketball with his classmates, he still hesitated when he saw Selena. I smiled, it won't happen again. No one can suppress my son's nature anymore. Chapter 1. As I just walked out of the office, I ran into Matthew and Vanessa, mother and daughter. Vanessa's daughter seemed to have suffered some grievance, with tears hanging on the verge of falling. Matthew, though wearing a gloomy face, spoke in an unusually gentle tone, soothing Vanessa's daughter. I feel a deep sorrow in my heart. He scolds his own son casually, yet takes great care of other people's daughters. When she saw me, the little girl seemed startled, and tears fell directly from her eyes with a blink. Matthew's face darkened. He stepped forward to block Vanessa and her daughter, coldly questioning, "What are you doing here?" I took a breath, and the last bit of goodwill dissipated. Missing the eye contact, I calmly said, "My son came home unhappy yesterday, and I came to understand the situation with the homeroom teacher." Vanessa smiled, picked up her daughter and said to me, "What a coincidence. A few bad girls in the morning gym class didn't let Selena play, and even jumped rope in front of her. This poor child came home crying." Matthew said we can't encourage the little gang mentality, and insisted on seeking justice for Selena. "Shouldn't you come in with us to talk?" I pretended not to see the smugness in the woman's eyes, but my drooping palms couldn't help but clench tightly. Matthew forbids our son from playing with his classmates. After a couple of times, no children came to play with our son. During that time, our son always came home feeling very down, so I took the initiative to ask the homeroom teacher about the situation, but Matthew and I ended up having a big fight. He complains that I am too fussy, saying it's just right for the child to focus on studying, and that I shouldn't bother the teacher casually. But seeing my son's dejected expression, I truly feel heartbroken. In the end, I privately contacted the parents of my son's classmates with gifts, and the situation was finally resolved. As for Matthew, I always thought he didn't understand children's sensitivity, but Vanessa's words hit me hard. It turns out he doesn't not understand. He just doesn't care about his son's feelings. I shook my head, said a word of good luck, and turned to leave. When I returned to the classroom, my son was excitedly leaning on the podium. Seeing me, he immediately waved for me to come over. "Mom, look. Selena got an A on this test. Dad said that as long as I help Selena improve her grades, he will let me participate in the tug-of-war competition." I looked at the report card and was so pained that I couldn't speak. I didn't even know that Matthew had such an agreement with his son. "Mom, hurry and send the report card to Dad. The tug-of-war competition is about to start." I responded with a greeting and took out my phone to send Matthew a photo. After seeing it, my son happily jumped off the podium and pulled me towards the playground. "Mom, remember to take a picture of me. I'm really strong and I will definitely win." Chapter 2. Perhaps it was his first time participating in the tug-of-war, and my son was very excited, greeting passers-by with cheers and joy. "Mom, look. That's my class over there. Can you help me take a few pictures with my classmates later?" As he spoke, my son took out the competition participant's armband from his pocket and solemnly put it on. I took a few pictures of him and watched as he walked towards his classmates. It seemed that a dozen or so children had discussed something, making my son the leader of the group, the first person. I looked at my son's uncontainable joy, and my heart ached. I hurriedly opened my phone to capture this moment. Since Matthew had his son pretend to be sick, such a vivid scene has become rare. The competition is about to start, and my son smiled in my direction. I also shook the phone in front of him and told him that I was recording, making sure to capture everything. But just before the whistle blew for the match, my son was substituted out. After being taken out by the teacher, my son seemed completely deflated. Lucas, Mom, the child's father said. The child is weak, and if the child participates in the competition, he will sue the school. We have no way out, and we hope you can understand. My mind went blank and my past understanding collapsed in an instant. After more than 10 years of acquaintance, it was the first time I saw Matthew acting like a spoiled child. In a daze, I truly understood Vanessa and her daughter's position in Matthew's heart. The competition did not pause because of my son. Hearing the distant chant of 1, 2, 3, pull, my son sadly threw himself into my arms. Selena, my grades have clearly improved. Why won't Dad let me participate? A pang of pain shot through my heart as I hurriedly crouched down to hug him. It's Dad who is being untrustworthy. How about after school? Mom will take you to play badminton to make it up to you. After calming my son down, I took a few steps out to plan on calling Matthew. No matter what, Lucas is still his son, and as a father, he cannot be untrustworthy. As the screen unlocked, Matthew's call came in automatically. The moment the call connected, the entire receiver was filled with Matthew's furious voice. Isn't it fine to sneak into a broken competition? Why do so many people need to know? Now everyone thinks Lucas is fine. What about Selena? How many strange looks does she have to endure? As a young girl, I was taken aback for a moment, slowly realizing what Matthew was talking about. Vanessa's daughter is introverted and disdainful of chatting with other kids. But she can't accept that she is the only one in the entire class who has no one to talk to. So ever since Vanessa and her son moved over, Matthew has forbidden his son from chatting with several classmates at once. And this time the results were released in the morning. The son saw Selena and then gathered with other participating classmates to chat more. As I watched my son, who was still eagerly focused on the tug-of-war competition in the distance, my anger grew stronger and my breathing became heavier. But Matthew failed to notice anything wrong and continued to question me. You're also sick. Why are you making a fuss over a stupid competition on social media? Are you satisfied now that Selena has been taken away by an ambulance due to her emotional outbursts? I'm giving you 10 minutes to get to the hospital and apologize. I looked at my son in the distance, suppressing my anger, and said, Impossible. Matthew, as a father, you are untrustworthy. What right do you have to lecture the child? Lucas won't go, so give up on that idea. After saying that, without waiting for the man on the other end to respond, I hung up the phone. My son came over and tugged at the hem of my clothes. Mom, please don't be angry. I'm not upset anymore. From now on, I will be a man and protect you. My nose tinged with sadness and I hugged my son again. Matthew, I have decided to let go. Chapter 3. After leaving school, I first took my son to the badminton court, bought new sportswear and a racket, and then drove to our old home in the suburbs. The villa in the suburbs was where my parents lived during their lifetime. Since the decision to leave has been made, it is time to say goodbye. Mom, this racket is better than the one at school. Look here. After getting out of the car, Lucas held my hand and explained to me, place by place, why this is better than school. I am feeling a bit sad. Lucas has liked these things since he was little, but because of Selena, he is afraid to bring it up because he worries I might argue with Matthew. I nodded slightly. Wait until you wear your new clothes to tell Grandpa and Grandma as well. Okay. The son nodded and happily ran to the front, wanting to help me open the door. But just as he was about to enter, he suddenly stopped, turned around, and ran back to say he wanted to grab another racket. I originally planned to stand at the door and wait for him, but the door was suddenly opened from the inside. It's Matthew. At that moment, the man was holding Selena in his arms, with Vanessa's wrist draped over his right arm. Vanessa saw me, calmly withdrew her hand and smiled. What a coincidence. My mind went blank, and I quickly pushed past Vanessa and rushed into the small courtyard. As expected, the layout inside had completely changed. What met my eyes was a sea of pink, but my heart felt like it had plunged into an ice cave. Who told you to move them, Matthew? This is my parents' house. What right do you have to let them move in? I was gasping heavily, but Matthew didn't care at all, retorting, What's the big deal about staying in a house for a while? The master said this place is suitable for Selena to recuperate. Don't worry, as soon as Selena is better, I'll restore it for you immediately. Besides, aren't you always suspicious? There are the spirits of your parents here, so you shouldn't be worried, right? I was extremely shocked listening to the man's absurd remarks, and the disappointment in my eyes could no longer be concealed. Matthew was momentarily startled but quickly regained his composure and said, "Don't be ungrateful. You caused Selena to have a breakdown and by law you could go to jail. It's already generous of Selena not to hold you accountable." After saying that, the man turned to leave. Just then Lucas ran back. Seeing Matthew, the son instinctively hid the racket behind his back and timidly called out, "Dad." Matthew didn't notice Lucas's emotional shift and coldly fixed his gaze on the hand behind his son. "What are you holding? Are you not feeling well and can't remember? Now you're smashing things in front of me. Don't force me to take action myself." The son stood still in place. Matthew was unable to achieve the same effect as before. His anger intensified. He strode towards his son as if provoked, handing Selena to Vanessa. I sensed something was wrong and rushed forward to stand in front of my son. "Matthew, what do you want to do?" Without any hesitation, Matthew pushed me aside and slapped his son across the face. Seeing the racket, he stepped on it even harder. "Lucas, is this how I usually teach you? As an older brother, how can you dare to show off the ball knowing your sister is unwell?" Chapter 4. Matthew was very strong. With one slap, his son's face immediately swelled on one side and tears streamed down his face. I hurriedly pulled my son behind me and shouted at Matthew, "Are you out of your mind? Hitting your own son for someone else? Matthew, if you don't want to raise our son, I can do it myself. We can divorce at any time to let you truly be with Vanessa." Matthew was stunned, looking at me in disbelief. Seeing this, Vanessa hurriedly pretended to mediate. "Sister-in-law, don't say such angry words in front of the children." After saying that, she looked at Matthew with a guilty expression. "Matthew, don't feel troubled because of me. I am already very grateful that you haven't forgotten our past feelings. Selena and I will leave now, and we won't trouble you again in the future." As she spoke, Vanessa suddenly burst into tears, saying with a pained heart, "It's just that Selena has suffered. Not a single day after she was born has she been able to express her emotions freely." I was left speechless for a moment. Selena's heart disease is not serious. One could say the success rate for surgery is 99%. But Vanessa just disagrees, repeatedly expressing her concerns in a motherly tone. Half a year has dragged on. Even if we now hire the most authoritative doctor for the surgery, it is likely that we won't reach the previous success rate. Matthew planned to offer comfort, but he glanced at me with some hesitation. Vanessa dramatically wiped her tears and ran off with Selena. Before the result could run 2 steps, Selena woke up. As soon as that child opened her eyes, she immediately became breathless. "Selena, what's wrong with you? Don't scare mommy." Hearing the commotion, Matthew immediately became anxious and rushed to Vanessa, urging her to get the child into the car right away. At the moment Matthew turned to leave, the son suddenly called out to him, asking if he could stay. "Dad, I understand Selena's illness. She won't just wake up like this." The man turned back, his eyes filled with disappointment and disgust. "Lucas, how have you become so cold? Selena is in life-threatening danger, and you're not worried. You can even say something like this. You really disappoint me too much." Just as I was about to retort, Matthew turned and left, leaving me with nothing but a threat. "Sandra, whether to divorce is up to you, but you can't take our son away. He thinks he can use the child to threaten me, but little does he know our son has never considered going with him." As soon as Matthew left, our son came up and hugged me. "I only want Mom." I hugged him back. The thought of leaving had never been so strong. Chapter 5. On that day, I officially submitted my resignation to the company. On the day my application was approved, I quickly booked the fastest flight. "Are you taking everything? Do you like this?" While packing, my son took out all of his belongings. I looked at the doll among the items with surprise. My son hesitated for a moment before quietly saying, "I don't like it." "Then why are you still carrying it? If we run out of money in the future, we can sell it for cash." My heart felt tight, and I couldn't help but tear up as I lowered my head to rest against my son's forehead. "There's no need for that. Mom can fully support Lucas. Lucas can just take what he likes. I have the ability to work, and with the savings my parents left me, I can completely support the living expenses for both me and Lucas. My son nodded and started to pack his luggage again. During a break, I took out my phone and opened the chat window with Matthew. I have already signed the divorce agreement. As a couple, I think it's necessary to inform him. The call was quickly connected, and Matthew's voice came through. Sandra, I have good news for you. Selena is getting better. I found the most authoritative expert on heart issues, and I have already made an appointment. In at most 2 months, Selena will be cured. The voice in the microphone was mixed with excitement, while my breathing on this side remained steady throughout. It has been more than 20 days since the last conflict. In the past, I would have definitely been unhappy. That is clearly my husband, yet he mentioned it only after 20 days of silence. The first thing is someone else's child. But now, I just made a sound of acknowledgement and didn't have much emotion. Hearing my response, Matthew became even happier. Don't worry, I will definitely make it up to you and your son when I get back. Didn't you mind Selena moving the old house last time? I've already had someone clear it out. Are you satisfied now? Before I could speak, the doctor's urging came from the other end. Matthew immediately hung up the phone. I listened to the busy tone, glancing at the divorce agreement on the coffee table, suddenly losing the desire to inform further. He would be able to see it when he comes back. Due to the son's motion sickness, a friend specifically stopped at a park on the way to the airport to let him recover. Seeing the amusement facilities not far away, the son asked if he could go play for a while. I looked at the time and nodded, saying, "You can play for a while. We have plenty of time right now." The son was very happy, running forward quickly all the way. But suddenly he stopped while running, and I walked in seeing Matthew and Vanessa, the mother and daughter. Vanessa looked at me in surprise. How does my sister-in-law know we are being treated at the nearby hospital? Lucas is also sick. Hearing the sound, Matthew turned around and immediately frowned when he saw me. Didn't you promise to behave well? Hurry back. You are affecting Selena's treatment here. Saying this, he glanced at the time, his tone growing more irritable. It's still far from school dismissal time. Aren't you afraid that taking Lucas out of class will lead him astray? I was about to speak when my son suddenly reached out towards Selena. Why can't she stand me participating in the tug-of-war competition? Yet she can sit on the seesaw. Isn't it possible to get emotionally worked up on the seesaw? Matthew was stunned, seeming somewhat at a loss. He picked Selena up and patted the seesaw. Kids can play after all. Come on, son, let dad play with you once. No need. You should just continue being Selena's dad. I was startled and quickly looked at my son. The son clenched his fists tightly, yet his gaze was incredibly resolute. That expression was exactly the same as when Matthew hit him while I was applying medicine to his wounds. Matthew was stunned by Lucas's words, and after he reacted, his face turned both red and dark. What did you just say? The son continued to clench his fists and said word by word. You can continue to be Selena's father. I don't need you anymore. Matthew looked at Lucas in disbelief. What nonsense are you talking about? Selena has her own father, and I am your dad. Saying this, Matthew turned to look at me, questioning what I had said to Lucas. I found it somewhat amusing, as if he had completely forgotten the time he slapped his own son. That slap Matthew gave was with full force, and coupled with Lucas's youth, it caused an injury that hasn't fully healed to this day. Matthew seemed to have thought of something, and a hint of guilt suddenly appeared on his face. Lucas, be a good boy, and after all this is over, Dad will make it up to you. You can play whatever you want. That day, you were indeed a bit too unruly, but there are no overnight grudges between father and son. It's all in the past. The son didn't speak, walking back in silence. Matthew asked me what was going on, and after I gave a few vague replies, I quickly left. Back in the car, I thought my son's mood would be even lower, but unexpectedly, after a moment of silence, he became lively again. Mom, will I be able to join gym class and play with my classmates after I start at the new school? I nodded slowly, listening to my son's expectations about the new school. After all, children's energy is limited. By the time we got on the plane, Lucas was almost asleep. As he passed through the turnstile, he suddenly murmured, I thought Dad would apologize to me. Mom, we're never going back. I responded with a good. The new school is even better than Lucas imagined. The kids here had no preconceived notions about Lucas and were enthusiastic on the first day of school, gathering around him to ask questions. On the first day, they warmly surrounded Lucas and asked all sorts of questions. Moreover, Lucas is good at studying and has a gentle temperament. After a few days of interaction, Lucas has completely integrated into the new class, and his smile has become increasingly vibrant. Just when everything was getting better, so much so that I was about to forget that Matthew hadn't sent me the divorce agreement yet, he called in the middle of the night. "Honey, I'm drunk. Can you come pick me up?" I was taken aback, instinctively thinking he had dialed the wrong number. Why is he calling me in the middle of the night, fueled by alcohol, to reach Vanessa? So I stayed silent and directly hung up. But before I could put down my phone, the call came in again. "This is Sandra." After leaving that sentence, I immediately turned off my phone. Matthew, you and Vanessa, mother and daughter, should no longer appear in my and Lucas's world for no reason. Chapter 7. I thought the call at night was an accident, but unexpectedly, I received another call from Matthew early the next morning. "Honey, are you home now? Lucas, has he gotten up?" I looked at my son, who was eating beside me, and he hummed in response. Then passed the phone to Lucas. I want to say a few words to him. I was indeed impulsive that day, and I apologized to my son. I didn't plan to hide Matthew's call from my son, so it's on speaker now. I could hear Matthew's last words, but my son had no reaction. I shifted my gaze back to the morning newspaper and declined, saying, "He is busy getting ready right now, maybe next time. So do you and Lucas want anything? I can bring something for you on my way home." Just before the call ended, Matthew asked eagerly, "Please sign the documents on the coffee table and hand them to my colleague." "No problem." After the call ended, I stared at my phone, puzzled. What was going on with Matthew all of a sudden? Shouldn't he be with Vanessa and her mother at this time? But soon I found out the reason. Vanessa called me from a different number. At that time, I had just walked out of the meeting room. Before I came here, I often took leave due to concerns about Mingming's situation at school, and my work performance was not good. However, after coming here, I quickly demonstrated my capabilities in just half a month. The call connected, and the person on the other end, Vanessa, seemed to be drunk. Her speech and logic were a mess. "How long do you plan to occupy Matthew with your questioning? Why does it seem like we're just a little bit short?" I was confused for a long time before I finally understood what she was trying to say. It turns out Selena is not her biological child. She blames me for suddenly appearing and taking away her man, so she adopted Selena to fight against me. Everything was going smoothly, but unexpectedly, the surgery encountered complications and urgently needed a blood transfusion. Vanessa is type AB blood. Selena is type O blood. This piece of information coincidentally caught Matthew's attention. Upon investigation, the two were found to have no blood relation. After the surgery, the doctor pointed out the child's long-term malnutrition. As all the information came together, Matthew realized too late that he had been played. Hearing this news, I felt no emotional fluctuation and calmly hung up and blocked him. Lucas and I have already started a new life. The past is no longer important. 10 minutes later, Matthew called again. His tone was shocked, and I could hear his voice trembling through the phone. "Wife, did you dial the wrong number? Why is this a divorce agreement? Also, what about your and our son's things?" "That's right, it's the divorce agreement. I've already signed it. Take a look, and if there are no issues, please sign it for me." "Why? Where are you and our son now?" Matthew was somewhat out of control, as if he had never anticipated this outcome. "It has nothing to do with you. You only need to sign the divorce agreement now." "I do not agree to the divorce, Sandra. Marriage is not a game. I will not agree to the divorce, nor will I give you custody of our son." "Then let's go to court. But one thing, I not only have the funds to raise Lucas to adulthood, but I can also secure Lucas's preference in court." "Mr. Matthew, how likely do you think it is that custody will be granted to you?" I couldn't be bothered to say more. I got straight to the point and hung up the phone. 2 days later, I hadn't received the divorce agreement, but I did see Matthew. The man stood at the school gate, seemingly having waited for a long time. Seeing Lucas, the redness around Matthew's eyes became even more pronounced. He picked up the racket beside him and said proudly, "Does Lucas like it?" Last time, Dad. Before the man could finish speaking, his son walked past him. Just before entering the door, Lucas suddenly turned around and said, under Matthew's expectant gaze, "Don't think about it. I'm with my mom." Upon hearing this, Matthew immediately showed a hurt expression. The son ignored him and turned to enter the school. I also couldn't be bothered to respond to him and turned back to go to work. Since that day, Matthew has been hanging around. Every day at various times, he would wait around, occasionally preparing a small gift. One could say that the concern shown in a day now exceeds that of the previous month. But it's too late. At first, I would remind him about the divorce agreement, but later I became increasingly perfunctory, automatically tuning out his voice as soon as I heard it. One afternoon, a month later, Matthew suddenly stood firmly in front of the car, not letting me leave. "Matthew, can you find another place to die? Today is my birthday." Matthew's tone was somewhat cautious as he tentatively asked, "It's my birthday today. Can you celebrate with me?" "I'm not interested. After all, since Vanessa appeared, I haven't celebrated any day with him. But the divorce issue has to come to a conclusion." I nodded, indicating it was just the right time to discuss the divorce. Matthew lowered his head and remained silent for a while before hoarsely asking, "Is there anything you want to eat?" "Anything." Quietly, it's best to talk business. Matthew's face turned pale for a moment. I couldn't be bothered to guess his thoughts and got into the car first. "Sandra, it's not what you think. Actually, Selena." "I know. Vanessa told me everything one night when she was drunk." In the restaurant, I waved my hand to interrupt Matthew. "So I was deceived," Matthew said emotionally, trying to grab my hand. "Sandra, can we not get a divorce? We already have a child. Can you bear for him to grow up in a single-parent family?" I sighed and opened my phone to show the man the video of Lucas's new school's sports day. In the video, Lucas, holding an athlete's card, was smiling at the camera, and his overall spirit looked much better than before. "Without you, Lucas is doing just fine. Matthew, if you really care about the child, you should sign the papers as soon as possible. The damage has already been done. No matter how much you say it, it won't erase the facts." Matthew looks very pained. He has his hands over his eyes, asking me how it could come to this. I can only say that from the moment he decided to sacrifice Lucas for Vanessa's daughter, the outcome was already determined. "Sandra, is it really impossible to salvage the feelings we've had for so many years? There's no way to fix it now." Upon hearing this, Matthew's shoulders trembled continuously, and I could only feel the irony. "What have you been doing all morning? If you don't want to go to court, I hope you can be on time at the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Chapter 9. When leaving the restaurant for home, Lucas was frying eggs in the kitchen. He wasn't tall enough yet and needed to stand on a small stool to wield the spatula. I looked at the 4 eggs that had already taken shape and curiously asked my son what he wanted to make. Seeing me, Lucas immediately put down the spatula and joyfully jumped down from the stool. "Mom, look at the eggs I fried. In the future, you can sleep in a little longer in the morning. I am a man of my word and will definitely take good care of Mom. I am soft-hearted to the point of being a mess. This is a bit dangerous for you to say right now. Can you help Mom sweep the floor first? If you want to do it, you must have Mom present." "Okay." The son obediently agreed and then handed me a pair of chopsticks to let me try. He said this was what the teacher taught them in class today. "Mom, I think I have a talent for cooking." The son looked up seriously and said, "Today the teacher taught us how to make soup dumplings, and I was the only one in the class who succeeded on the first try. The classmates are all surrounding me, asking me to teach them. Mom, can you do it? If you can't, I can teach you tonight. Then Mom will go knead the dough in a bit." I look at my son's current state and feel incredibly fortunate for the choice I made back then. Being noticed is something everyone needs. In the previous school, because no one played with my son, when a classmate spoke to him, he would cling to them like a drowning person, desperately trying to keep them. But now this situation has completely disappeared. The next morning at 10 o'clock, in front of the Civil Affairs Bureau, there were not only Matthew but also Vanessa and her daughter. Selena, perhaps it is because she just had surgery. She looks much paler than before. When I arrived, Vanessa was arguing with Matthew. I pieced together the past of the two from their fragmented words. Childhood sweethearts in love at a young age. Yet she is unwilling to be ordinary, wanting to leap and become a phoenix. She refuses to be dumped, remembering for many years. And now, Vanessa wants Matthew to fulfill the promise he made to marry her, but Matthew has lost that intention. I didn't have time to wait for the two of them to finish arguing, so I walked over and called out to Matthew. It was only then that I noticed he had a large dark circle under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept all night. "Go in," Matthew grunted in response. Vanessa, although she didn't speak again, followed closely behind us, staring intently at me and Matthew. While signing, Matthew suddenly stopped and asked if he would still be able to see Lucas in the future. "You are his biological father. Legally speaking, as long as Lucas agrees, there is no problem. Will Lucas forgive me? I'm not sure." Matthew paused again, his gaze vacant, not knowing what to write. It wasn't until Vanessa nudged him that he snapped back to reality. After signing, Matthew seemed to be drained of all his energy, slumping lifelessly in the chair. In contrast, Vanessa suddenly came alive like a summer butterfly, continuously urging the staff to issue their marriage certificate. I had no interest in this. After obtaining the certificate, I left the Civil Affairs Bureau directly. Chapter 10. When I returned home for the new year to visit my parents' graves, I unexpectedly found some joss paper that had not completely burned out in front of the tombstone. Looking around, I saw Matthew behind the big tree. For the past few months, Matthew had been trying to contact his son, but each time he came, his son was unwilling to see him. "Mom, what are you watching?" "Nothing." I lowered my head and lit the paper money. A lot has happened over the past year, and I slowly recounted the growth of the past year to my parents. The son followed suit, and after I finished speaking, he also told his grandparents about the things he thought were worth remembering. This time I came back. I brought Lucas to meet old friends. When old friends gather, they always like to find some common topics from the past. Someone mentioned Matthew to me. She asked me if I knew about Matthew and Vanessa getting married. I shook my head. To be fair, I am not concerned about the future of any of the three of them, but if I really had to choose one, I would be more interested in Selena's outcome. That child does have some cunning, but they are not the instigator of all this. A friend said that Matthew and Vanessa's wedding was quite simple, so simple that the groom didn't even show up. After the wedding, Vanessa officially moved in with Selena to the marital home of Matthew and me. At first, Vanessa was quite pleased, but later she realized something was wrong. Matthew, although he goes to work on time every day to earn money and strives for promotions and raises, never gives her any money. She wanted to use Selena to make money, but she didn't expect Matthew to directly get Selena a meal card. I made a sound of acknowledgement and asked, "What about now? How is that child doing?" The friend paused for a moment, their expression somewhat unnatural. "He's dead. Heart disease." "No." A friend suddenly lowered his voice and whispered, "Everyone suspects that child was used to exchange for accident insurance. You don't know how strange it is suddenly jumping off a building to commit suicide." I don't know what to say. Fortunately, no one got caught up in it, and the topic was quickly moved past. Half a year later, one day Matthew suddenly called me asking if I could bring our son back for a visit. At that time, I was attending a friend's wedding back home. After thinking for a moment, I told him that our son was currently at summer camp and couldn't come back. "Can you come then?" "I can't. Matthew, there is no relationship left between us." I returned to the office after the wedding ended. Later, during a casual chat, a friend told me that Matthew had an incident on the day he got married. After Vanessa ran out of money, she started stealing and selling valuable items from the house. She even wanted Matthew to end up like Selena. But Matthew had discovered her thoughts early on, taking precautions and sending her to prison with one leg. "Anne." A friend suddenly leaned in quietly. "I heard that Matthew made a will, and after he dies, the money will go to you and Lucas. Is that true?" I was taken aback. I vaguely recalled that phone call at the time. "It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. I and Lucas don't need his money. Aren't you afraid that your son will run off with his father in the future?" the friend joked. I shook my head. "It's different. People are different."